oil spill represents just the latest blow to a place that's already suffered multiple economic disasters and decades of environmental degradation that has led to disappearing wetlands and habitats. That's why we must make a commitment to the Gulf Coast that goes beyond responding to the crisis of the moment.
Most Americans were probably wondering, what does the president mean? Here's the big picture. Louisiana's coastal wetlands are dying, and were dying long before the Deepwater Horizon exploded. More than a football field worth of wetlands disappears every hour. A football field worth of land every hour for 80 years and counting. That's like the entire state of Delaware disappearing, the urban area of Greater Chicago turning to open water, or California's Marin and Sonoma counties falling into the Pacific. Why has this happened? Over the last 7,000 years, the natural cycle of Mississippi River flooding built and rebuilt Louisiana's wetlands with sediment. But then we began to control the river. From the 1850s to the 1930s, the Mississippi River became the lifeblood of the Midwest, America's first superhighway, transporting the bounty of the nation's interior to the hungry East Coast and abroad. To protect cities and towns from flooding and to allow navigation by ocean-going ships and barges, the government followed a policy of building levees, hemming in the waters. But by building the levees, we channeled all the sediment straight into the Gulf of Mexico, and the wetlands started to disappear. Engineers knew this would happen, but they built the levees anyway. We can now see how the levees starved the wetlands of life-giving sediment and water, forcing hundreds of millions of tons of priceless sediment away from land and into the deep Gulf waters. And that isn't the only problem. In the 1930s, offshore drilling was born in the Gulf Coast. The oil industry drove domestic production and American power through World War II and the post-war peace, helping develop the mighty American economy. But the oil industry also left a legacy of destructive drilling infrastructure. Tens of thousands of miles of canals were dredged to lay pipelines and provide shipping channels for surface vessels. Vast areas of wetlands were directly destroyed by the dredging. The resulting canals disrupt natural water flows and bring in salt water that poisons the remaining wetlands. Today, those pipelines and canals support a vast industrial infrastructure of offshore oil and gas production. The well that the BP Deepwater Horizon was drilling when it exploded would have been just one of almost 4,000 other well sites and 40,000 miles of pipelines. While this area produces a third of the oil and gas we use, it's also destroying wetlands that communities and wildlife need to survive.
Beyond compensating the people of the Gulf in the short term, it's also clear we need a long-term plan to restore the unique beauty and bounty of this region.
That means first we must make Gulf Coast communities whole again. Then we need to rebuild the wetlands. So who must contribute? BP because of the blowout? Yes. The oil industry because of 80 years of damage? Yes. The nation and the government because of a century of economic growth? Yes. Now is our chance to repair the damage. In the 30 years that EDF has worked in the Gulf Coast, the need to restore this national economic resource and ecological treasure has never been greater. Billions of dollars from BP, the oil industry, and government will be spent in the disaster cleanup and response. We can use some of this money to repay our debt to the Gulf Coast and restore the wetlands, wildlife, and communities harmed by our carelessness.
We must make a commitment to the Gulf Coast that goes beyond responding to the crisis of the moment. I make that commitment tonight.